Good afternoon.
Okay, and welcome once again to the this major celebration of Wellspring. Our reading this afternoon, the Call of Jeremiah, is also a very personal verse for me, because for those of you who know about my work, in addition to my teaching profession at George Mason University, I'm also a field practitioner in trauma healing and conflict transformation. And part of this is that I travel all over the world, literally. And just recently, I just came back from East Africa, and prior to that in Cambodia. And these people, they know about Al. Okay, Al Fuertes, a professor, he's Filipino from the United States, and he's going to be our facilitator. But then, when they see me in person, they would say, "Are you sure you are our facilitator?" Why do you think made them ask that way? Huh? You look like a boy.
Hear,
You
hear.
look like our grandson. You know? And this is a valid response, you know? Because we are talking about, like in Kenya, the Somali ambassador was one of the participants. The vice mayor of Mogadishu, you know, the top-ranking government leaders. And then when they first saw me, there's always that feeling of, oh boy, can we trust this person? Huh? So, and there's another story that I will share with us, you know, later on as part of my reflection. But anyhow, this should not stop us from, you know, doing what we are called to be. And Jeremiah could also be any institution, any organization for that matter. Our reflection this afternoon highlights the belief that we, the people, the church, do not only exist for mission. Our identity as a church is not just that of God's messengers of good news. I would like to emphasize the notion that the church is God's mission. We are God's mission. This idea stems from the theology of God incarnate. That God is becoming human like us in and through Jesus Christ. However, my faith also suggests that God also reveals God's self, and that God also incarnates in each and every one of us. As Genesis 1:27 indicates, and I quote, "So God created human beings in God's own image. In the image of God, God created them, male and female. God created them." Unquote. To me, this passage implies that we human beings are an embodiment of God's image. God made God's self known to the whole universe in and through us and the rest of God's creation. And so the church exists not only for mission or to do God's mission, but the church is part of God's mission in this universe. And part of this is to live and exemplify in our day-to-day lives, in our outlook in life, in our daily relationships and interactions with one another and the world, what it means to be created in the image of God. In this reflection, I will use God's call of Jeremiah as a template or as an example, as a framework in exploring the essence of us being God's mission. And I think this is an appropriate theme for this celebration. Before going to the meat of our reflection, I have some questions to ask, or a question. What comes to mind when you hear this phrase, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart"? What comes to mind when you hear that? Especially if you kind of personalize it. Any response? Yes?
You were made before, because God made you before anybody knew you.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. Very well said. Anybody else? What about from the adult? Okay, this is not a challenge. The child led the way.
The predestination. You're set apart.
Oh, okay. It was the whole idea that
Presbyterian.
is going out of this God's plan. Everyone is predetermined, so that's right. Yes, thank you,
God's
sir.
engagement with us every moment of our lives.
Okay, there is that. You know, I think there's beauty to that. No? What you have said, constitute the different themes surrounding our reading this afternoon. People who believe in predestination also use this to support their claim that we are predestined. And if you are an advocate of this, that means, well, there's really nothing that we can do anymore to change the course of our life, right? Whatever we want to do, however we want to change, transform our environment, our world, it will lead us to nowhere because we are already predetermined, predestined. Okay? But I don't think that is what God what the phrase, the verse entails. Of course, God wanted Jeremiah to become a prophet. I think that was the bottom line. Another way of looking at it is that the passage is also about God commissioning Jeremiah for a mission. It is like God telling someone in a form of a revelation. At a tender age, when you were baptized as a baby and your parents made a promise to nurture you, I have already set you apart. Or that time during your confirmation, when you took responsibility of the promise your parents made when you were baptized as a baby, I have already known you actually. But what kind of a prophet Jeremiah was? And also, what was the context when he received God's call to uproot and destroy, to build and to plant? I love this phrase, to uproot and destroy. Wow, sounds violent there. And to build and to plant. Okay? And Michael already provided us with some of the contextual or historical background. But just to add, okay? We know that Jeremiah was a priest, a native of Anathoth in the tribe of Benjamin. And he was called to the prophetic office when he was very young, about 70 years after the death of Isaiah. And one can say that the general subject of his prophecies is multidimensional. He was tasked to denounce the idolatry and sins of Judah, the judgment by which they were threatened, with reference to their future restoration and deliverance, and of course, the promises of the Messiah. Jeremiah's call, according to our passage, was to be a prophet, not to the Jews only, but to the neighboring nations as well. In other words, he was the United Nations ambassador, very much involved in foreign affairs and international relations of his time. Then there are a few highlights from the reading that I would like for us to reflect on. Very textual here. And these highlights provides us with some in-depth understanding of the nature of our being God's mission. The first highlight is the phrase, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." The event that unfolds during God's call implies that God who formed us knows for what particular services and purposes God intends us to do and be. However, it also suggests that unless God sanctifies us with God's new creating spirit, we shall never be fit for this task and service. That's part of the theological underpinning here. In being God's mission, there is always that element of blessing us as we embark on God's work here on earth. Perhaps before Wellspring came into being, and while the people that comprised Wellspring, the early days of Wellspring, were still very, very much a part of Little River UCC, maybe God was already in the process of forming Wellspring at that time. Maybe there was no name yet, but there was already that feeling, the gut feeling that maybe there is another community, faith community, that would exist from this emerging community that's already in existence. This phrase further implies a sense of being really unique and special before God's eyes. We were created with divine intention. And you can just imagine the intensity of it, the beauty of this. To me, this particular phrase is very personal in a way that it affirms one sense of identity and the basic need to belong. Belonging to God who created us. I remember when I was in college, I would invite this phrase right on my desk to always remind me that I am special before God. I don't know, maybe there was a sense of insecurity on my part. In bold letters, this particular phrase, and every day, I always read this, to remind me that I am special before God, which stemmed that, from that need of perhaps being wanted and loved as a human being. It just dawned on me, okay? Every day I would read this phrase and understand the meaning behind it, that my existence in this world is for a purpose. And I think that was important for me to sustain my commitment and my passion, especially in my social involvement. I was very, very active in social events at that time, when I was in college, and even actually today, of course. That I did not exist in a vacuum. That I am a person uniquely created by God. And this experience helped shape my self-identity. Reflecting on how special a creation I am also informs my theology of a loving, caring, and a God who is artistic and imaginative. So this theology, kind of theology, a personal theology, stems from how I also see myself, how I describe and define myself as such. The second highlight that I would like to mention is on verse 5b. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. This phrase contextualizes our being made by God and set apart. We are unique, we are special, not just for special sake, but rather our sense of being is that of mission. Mission is who and what we are. Being known by God even when we were still in our mother's womb, even when we were still in the womb of Little River UCC. Let's just put it that way. And I think Bert also mentioned that earlier today. Is a humbling truth, as it implies a sense of something that is about to emerge in the process. And this something is the divine calling, okay? Which I will discuss more later on, and can be a complex and risky task. We all know that. Well, God, if that is the case, I would rather not be special. Let me just be a nobody. Okay? Well, that's too late, my friend, because God has already known you and has already set you apart long before you were born. You might as well just take it and live with it and enjoy it.